This episode comes with a trigger warning as topics surrounding rape, sexual violence, torture, murder, and content of an upsetting nature will be discussed. Viewers and listeners are advised to proceed with caution. On October the 7th, 2023, Hamas terrorists waged the deadliest attack on Jews since the Holocaust, slaughtering babies, raping women, burning whole families alive, and taking hundreds of innocent civilians hostage. Since October the 7th, more than 1,200 Israelis have been killed. Terrorists are still holding 132 men, women, and children in captivity. As a podcast who champions women from all walks of life, I was shocked to see the response around the world, specifically around the heinous sexually violent attacks launched on innocent women. Movements around the globe who claim to advocate for the rights of women have been silent, deafeningly so, which has sparked a debate around whether Israeli women are included in the #MeToo movement. Not only was rape used as a weapon in war on that day, but captive women are still being subjected to Hamas's sick sex crimes. This is not a political debate about the ongoing war in the Middle East. This episode is purely dedicated to the forgotten women of October 7th and since, and speaking for those who can't. Imagine if this was your daughter, your sister, your friend. I hope I can do the victims and families justice by shedding light on the truth of what happened and is currently happening.
Shalom, I'm Ayelet from Israel. I am a lawyer. I am part of the Dina 710 project, which is dedicated to understanding what happened on October 7th in regard to the gender-based violence, and also advocating for its victims domestically and also internationally. I am the former director of the Authority for the Advancement of the Status of Women, the former legal advisor of the Association of the Rape Crisis Centers, and a former state attorney's office prosecutor, criminal prosecutor. So all my life professional path has brought me to this time and moment to be able to do what I am doing now, facing this tragedy.
Obviously, it's a very traumatic thing to have to even talk about, let alone to have to experience. I was at the briefing at the Houses of Parliament where it was discussed in great detail how those sexual assaults were carried out. And I think it's actually really important to be a little bit more specific on how Hamas not just sexually assaulted and violated women, but I think when I heard the details, the depraved details of it, it was so barbaric. I never thought that anyone could even think something up so evil. Are you able to elaborate a little more on some of the things that specifically happened to some of the women?
Yes, I will. Again, a trigger warning to anyone who's listening. But with your permission, as I am a criminal lawyer, mm-hmm. I would want to outline the evidential status, mm-hmm. in not by the various forms of sexual assault we saw, but by the strength of evidence. So okay. I think it makes like a clearer picture, mm-hmm. of what happened that day. So first of all, I'll start with the testimonies. We have direct testimonies of survivors. There is the testimony of Amit Sosana that was covered in the New York Times. Brave Amit Sosana. She was kidnapped from her house in Kibbutz, Kfar Aza. You could see her fight off like 10 or 15 terrorists taking her. There was footage of this, trying to take her, and she's fighting, struggling them with all her might. She was taken to captivity, and she talks about being abused in several ways, besides, all the general conditions of being in captivity. She was totally isolated from the world. She was chained to the wall. She was hit, abused, touched in her upper body part constantly, there's total dependency on your captor. So he can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. But in specific, he talks about a situation where her captor, Muhammad, went into her, while she was showering, went into the bathroom and forced her at gunpoint to commit a sexual act on him. Afterwards, he regretted it and he apologized and said, please don't tell Israel. So that is what she describes in her testimony. That was a direct testimony of this kind of abuse. There are testimonies of released hostages that also other released hostages that talk about being touched, having to undergo gynecological examinations with no reason to. They didn't ask for it and it was forced on them. There are testimonies of released hostages that witnessed rapes and also that were told by remaining hostages, the female hostages that are still in captivity as we speak, that they were sexually assaulted, and also that some of them reported that they stopped getting their period. Now, this might be, of starvation, of stress, but also we understand that sexual assault is part of what they're undergoing there, might mean that they're pregnant, a few months pregnant already, which is as horrific as all other things of these descriptions are horrific.
Yeah.
There are also testimony of a soldier that the Hamas invaded the army base where she served, that they repeatedly demanded that she takes off her uniform. In some way, amazing way, she found a way to resist him, so nothing happened, but it was a repeated demand. So those are the direct testimonies. There are also a report from the Ministry of Welfare that they were approached by 5 survivors, 4 women and 1 man, that reported that they're survivors of sexual assault. They're all from the Nova Party. So again, those are indications for or evidence for direct testimonies. We have testimonies of eyewitnesses to sexual assaults of different forms, rapes, gang rapes, mutilation, cutting of a breast, in the Nova Party and also in an army base. All of the testimonies that were published, the victims were murdered during or after the rape, so there are no survivors from that. And there are numerous testimonies of first responders who came to the 4 scenes, as I described before, where they describe what I said. They see the same pattern of bodies that were found naked, fully or partially stripped naked, bodies burned in their chest and the genitalia, mutilated, objects that were inserted into their bodies. They're also handcuffed. Again, numerous bodies that were found in this position, and that you can conclude that there was a pattern. There's, like I said, they're geographically separated, these scenes. And also we're starting to get indications from medical and mental health officials that are being approached by survivors that are starting to, reach out to get treatment. So we do have survivors. But maybe I should have started with this. We will probably never know what happened, the scope of what happened on October 7th, because many of the victims were murdered, their bodies were burned, and because the scene was evacuated when it was evacuated, the bodies were evacuated, it was still a war zone. They were, they didn't treat it as a crime scene. They did not, photo the scenes systematically or take forensics exams. So a lot of information we could have gotten is lost, is buried with the bodies.
Mm-hmm.
But the bodies that are recorded and were found are bodies that, tell a story.
I mean, there's clearly irrefutable evidence that this happened. Why are there so many people, including women, around the world who are saying this never happened? Where's the evidence? What can we say to the people who say this never happened?
Well, first we have to understand why they're saying it, and then we can think of what might, change, influence their opinion. So I've been working with a team, an expert team, which is called the Dinah Group, Dinah Project. Dinah is the daughter of Jacob and Leah. That was the biblical character that was abducted and raped. And also Dinah in Hebrew is her justice. So, it has this double meaning. So we've been working, amongst other things, been advocating and talking about this in different platforms, either public or professional. And I can say in general, I get 3 responses. One is of, total disbelief and saying that the movies that the terrorists themselves broadcasted themselves is AI. So there's nothing I can do about that. That's like pure anti-Semitism.
Yeah,
it is. They're so proud of what they did, and they again broadcasted themselves. So really, there's nothing I know, not in my tools on how to impact that. But there are groups that are either, none of this is a good answer, right? That are either ignorant or want to stay like neutral, don't want to get involved, indifferent. And those are groups of people that I do aim to reach and to tell them what happened, what we know happened, because I believe that if you are, faced with the facts, with the stories, with the testimonies, with the footage, you just can't stay, indifferent to this. And to those people who think they're staying neutral and, not taking a side, it's really important for me to stress that it really doesn't matter where you stand on this political issue, if you're pro-Palestine or pro-Israel or pro-whatever. If you do not recognize the atrocities Hamas did, if you do not condemn Hamas, if you do not actively demand that it is declared a terror organization, if you do not say, I believe, you are setting us back. The women's achievement, the feminist achievements, the Me Too protest achievements, you're setting us back years and years. Because how can you explain this disbelief? How can you put this rape, only this rape, into context, right? All my life, I call myself a professional feminist. All my life, I've been protesting for Iranian women, American women, British women, Australian women. This is what we do. This is the feminist solidarity. This is what we do. And I'm asking, who is protesting for me, for the tragedy that happened to my people, to the Israeli women? And it's heartbreaking for me, and honestly, on a personal level, that we're abandoned by the professional community, by the feminist community.
Yeah, and I think absolutely, and I think as a Jewish woman who's in Britain right now, I've asked myself the question, which is such a sad question to have to ask yourself in any way, and it doesn't make it any better, but is this because these were Israeli women that were sexually violated, or is it because they were Jewish women? And that was my question at the beginning, but now the two are kind of interlinked, because let's face it, most Jewish women are Zionists, believe in the right to the Jewish state. So are you saying that I don't matter? I don't
Yes.
matter if someone rapes me, I either deserved it or I can be ignored? What kind of feminist movement could even call themselves advocates for females when they're excluding an entire group, a race, a religion? It's kind of it muddies the view of feminists and how far we've come over the last even just 30 years, 20 years. And you think, am I even included anymore? Am I one of the women? Am I considered a woman? I know that it's left a lot of Jewish women in general feeling very, very lost about where they stand, and whether anyone would really care if they experience that.
I just want to make clear, they changed the rules on us. I still believe in the sisterhood and the solidarity. They excluded themselves, my sisters. It's devastating for me, because really it's my whole belief, my core. It's such a big part of my identity. But I'm still the same, and I'll still protest for when women's rights are violated all over the world. And I hope that what I am doing, what we are doing now together, will help maybe make some clarity on where is the right side of history to stand with. The testimonies, maybe I'll share with you one testimony of an eyewitness in the Nova party. This is a hard testimony. It's important to say. It's just a part of a horrific testimony. I saw the terrorists bending her over, raping her, and simply passing her on to the next. She was alive when they raped her. She was on her feet and bleeding from her back. He pulled her hair. He shot her in the head while raping her. Didn't even lift his pants. They cut off her breast and played with it. And I have to say that at the beginning, when I heard this, I said, okay, that's cutting a breast. I mean, rape, okay, but cutting a breast, what an effort, what cruelty. But then, and this was in the Nova party, like I said. But then there was a testimony of Secretary Blinken, who was who shared that he was showed footage or testimony of a family in a kibbutz that was slaughtered in the breakfast table. And he told that every family member that was murdered, they cut some kind, a piece of, like, mutilated him in some way, and that the mother's breast was cut. So this is in the Nova, and this is in a kibbutz, and that's the MO that I'm talking about. And there's more and more testimonies that, this is just an example. An important part of the evidential status is also footage. There's a lot of footage. The terrorists broadcasted themselves, phones, surveillance cameras, the first responders, and also there's a lot of footage coming from Gaza. IDF brings computers and phones that might hold information about the terrorists, the terror organization, hostages, and other information, intelligence. So we have a lot of footage. I do not know that an act of sexual violence was recorded. There are a lot of pictures and movies of those indications that I talked about before, to gender-based violence, of bleeding pelvises. And I'm talking about a lot of bodies that you see that are naked, half naked, legs spread, no underwear, and stains of blood in the genitalia area. So that is unfortunately a very strong indication to abuse and torture, sexual abuse and torture. I'm sure the pictures are pictures and the footage, also parading naked bodies in Gaza, abusing them, stepping on their genitalia. They were paraded like treated as war trophies. Sabaya, that's what it's called. It's women war spoils. And I'm sure you all saw the footage that was released just last week. In regard to testimonies up until now, as far as verified information I can talk about, there's one admission to rape of the terrorists. There was a Hebrew pronunciation guide found in one of the kibbutzim telling, like written in Arabic letters, how to say, take off your pants.
Oh, God.
Yes. In Hebrew, how to say that in Hebrew.
Mhm.
Now, I'm asked at this point, usually when I brief groups, I'm asked, well, we've seen the footage of the IDF, also how they treat detainees, and that they have to take their Palestinian detainees, and they have to take their clothes off. So it's important to stress that this is not the same.
Mm.
When the IDF enters Khan Yunis, it announces IDF is going to enter Khan Yunis, evacuate from Khan Yunis. Anyone who will be found in Khan Yunis was suspected as a terrorist. And then if you're found in Khan Yunis, then it's only logical and allowed by any international law to strip search you. And also, I have to say, afterwards, they get these bodysuits. I can show you a picture, but of course, nobody shows that. So it makes sense. It is not the same, and I believe I don't
clearly.
And so it's not the same as going to a family's house on Shabbat morning, a civilian family's house, and demanding to strip them. Also, again, it's only take off your pants. It's not like strip all over, only your pants. So that is very
I think anyone with any intelligence and isn't drowning in bias would know that it's clear what happened. So many times when I have tried to speak on what happened and my sorrow over what happened, people have said, but the IDF always rape Palestinian women. That is always the reply. And I remember we discussed this on our phone call earlier, and I liked your response for it because you were very clear about that. What is your response when people say, what about the rapes of Palestinian women? Yeah.
The whataboutism. So I'll say this in the most clear way. If there are indications of any violations of international law or other criminal behavior of IDF soldiers, they should be investigated and prosecuted. And we have legal authorities to do so. I myself was a former prosecutor, and I prosecuted, 2 or 3 incidences, border policemen that were used their authority and position also to sexual assault, not rapes, but sexual assault in various ways. So Israel does that and knows how to do that. Having said that, up until now, there is, I can't even call it a report. There are 3 pages by UN officials that throw allegations at the IDF, saying that they were sexual assault, but not giving even a shred of information to pull on. So to start an investigation, and I'm not saying bring us the victim. If there's no victim, I don't believe. No, I'm not saying that. I understand that victims, it's hard for them to come out and speak. I'm talking about what unit, what they were wearing, where did it happen, anything to start an investigation. This is an investigation. And I know as a fact that there's no thread to pull on. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. When there are different reports that I've seen that do talk about indications to sexual assault, that's what they call it, by the IDF. They speak about taking clothes of detainees, which again are explained by international law, or very, very, very minor kinds of behavior that should be investigated. but are not in any way to be compared to the hell breaking loose that I just described. And really, I'm not saying everything that we do know. So putting it in the same level is, again, hypocrisy, anti-Semitism. I don't know how to call it. It's just trying maybe to be politically correct, being balanced, but it's not balanced. And it's just mind-blowing. And most importantly, if I didn't say that before, it is not systematic. It is not the orders that the IDF was sent to Gaza to carry out. If it happened, it's one or whatever. It's a soldier that, against orders. It is not like the terrorists that, again, we see that this was part of their orders.
Yeah, and I think the key thing is that everyone saw that video early on of a mostly naked body of a young lady being paraded through Gaza, and the streets were erupting in celebrations, and it was like looking at pure barbarianism, and it didn't even feel like we were in the year we're in. And when and it was so sickening and disgusting. And when have we ever paraded anyone? Because it's sick, right? It's sick. And I think something you said that really resonated with me last time was when you say believe all women, you believe all women. It doesn't matter where they're from. They can be Palestinian, Israeli. You believe all women who come forward with testimony. And I think that's the key thing here. It's not this narrative of, I only care about Israeli women or Jewish women. You are advocating for every single female on this earth. And I think that's definitely an important thing to remember, and leads me into my next question, which is obviously you have worked a lot with rape survivors and sexual assault survivors. What are the psychological impacts on those survivors of either being shamed, victim shamed, saying you deserved it, or not even being believed that it happened? Because I think it would be important to speak about what maybe some of these women are currently going through right now who have spoken out and been brave.
Yeah, well, there's two things I want to say in regard to that. First of all, many of the survivors, or I'll say all the survivors, had suffered multiple kinds of trauma. Some of them have went through a sexual assault, but also have gunshots, have family that were murdered or kidnapped. So they have gone and still going through different several layers of trauma that, sexual assault is just part of it. And, the healing process will be that, I don't know, I'd have to say endless. And many of them that I did speak to say that as long as we have hostages, the healing process can't even start, because they're so, their heart is still there, especially released hostages that, they have guilt that it was them that were released, and their friends or their family still are left behind. So there's all this, and also this belief. Research shows, all kinds of research and sexual trauma show that the two main first needs of sexual assault victims is first gaining back control, and second is recognition that the assault happened, recognition that I'm a victim, recognition that this person is the perpetrator. And they cannot get that at this time and point. That's part of, what I feel is such a big part of me and my team's mission, I said we're called Dina, her justice, is what one of the things that we're trying to claim is recognition. So there was a very big breakthrough with the UN report that was published on March, that found, it was of the mission team that led by Ms. Pramila Patan, who is the special representative on conflict-related sexual violence. And, up until then, it was only Israel saying it wasn't enough. But now there's a UN report, and no one can, think that in any way the UN is pro-Israel.
Yeah.
And they have it's not even an investigation, it's a mission. And they were here for 2 weeks, and they did very thorough work. My group, we worked with the authorities, and did everything we can to make sure they have access to all kinds of intelligence and information and footage and whatnot. And there's 3 main conclusions that are very important for the recognition that I was talking about for the victims. One is that there's reasonable grounds to believe that conflict-related sexual violence occurred in multiple locations, including rape and gang rape in at least 3 locations in southern Israel. The second is they determined that there's indications to a pattern. They don't do the extra step to say this was premeditated, but I don't need them to do that. I mean, it's logic, and it makes sense. And most importantly, especially, like I said, as we have hostages still in captivity, is that they found clear and convincing information that the hostages were subjected to various forms of sexual violence, including rape. Listen, they specify rape and sexualized torture and sexualized cruel and inhumane and degrading treatment. And it also has reasonable grounds to believe that such violence may be ongoing. Which is really important. And again, this is not Ayelet from Israel saying, this is the UN.
Yeah.
So this has some sense of recognition, but it feels like, we have to keep demanding, to make discussions about it, to make sanctions to it.
Yeah.
In relation to that, legal and economics.
I mean, and in what other scenario in today's day and age have you had to come up with such a huge amount of evidence for someone just to even listen? And that's what I find the most offensive part about this whole thing, is that
The double standard.
Yeah, because often people, you hear stories, or you see documentaries on TV where unfortunately someone is raped, and never in that case it was like, show me proof. It's like this immediate demand for proof, even though like there are women involved here. These are real people who have gone through something extremely traumatic, and they have been brave enough to recount those details, which is an entire step in itself, to then have to fight to be heard and to be believed. And this is why I wanted to record this podcast episode, because if it even means anything at all, that we believe you and we advocate for you. And that may not, it doesn't hold enough weight, because it should be everyone condemning this. But even if there's just a small thing that I or you, obviously you do a lot more work than I do within the field, but even just as a podcast that advocates and empowers and highlights amazing females, to say, I believe you and I'm with you and I want justice to be served. If that holds
It's
any
really
weight.
important.
Yeah.
It is really important what you and we are doing now. It's bearing witness, and it's using your strong social platform to bring this voice further, and maybe to awake people who have been, I don't know, blind to this or ignorant to this, and let them know that this is very, unfortunately, I wish that I would have found out that this is, fake or exaggerated
Yeah.
but the further we go, the more we collect, there's more and more pieces to this puzzle too. And it's horrific. And again, it's not even the tip of the iceberg, because they burned bodies.
Yeah. They burned evidence,
Countless.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very, very planned.
I'd like to call out any single female that identifies as a feminist, or even any human being that identifies as a humanitarian, and inform them that they are not what they say they are, if they are trying to argue this didn't happen or somebody deserved it. Nobody deserves this, first of all. I think that, and I'm not comparing this to the Holocaust because they are different things, but I think this is one of those things where history will eventually catch up, and maybe it will take a few decades to do so. But the truth will prevail, and shame on anyone who denied this. It could have been their daughter, their friend, their sister, their best friend, their wife. It could be
If this
anyone.
happened to us, yes, I'll say this. If this happened to us, we have a strong, sophisticated army. If this happened to us, it can happen anywhere. I would have never, I'll share with you that when I was, I met with the UN team, they showed me it was supposed to come out as part of an annual report on conflict-related sexual violence, global report. And I was presented with the report of last year, and I looked at the countries that were stated there, and then I burst into tears because I could not believe that Israel is going to have a chapter of its own in this club that nobody wants to be in, where a conflict-related sexual assault occurred. So again, if it happened in Israel, it can really happen anywhere, and not condemning and not taking proactive steps to limit the power, the economic power, the religious power, the political power of organizations like this is giving them even more inspiration for others to do what happened here. And it's a matter of time.
So the next thing I wanted to touch upon with you, and I think I speak for all, not just Israeli women, but Jewish women here, about the distinct feeling of deep betrayal that we feel from organizations that claim to advocate for women's rights. We already know it took UN Women over 3 months to release a statement, which was lackluster at best. It was pretty pathetic. And that's just one of many organizations who claim to advocate for females.
Not only UNICEF, there were there were babies burned alive, hostages. Still, we have 2 babies in captivity. UNICEF took their time on saying that, condemning Israel. They did immediately. World Health Organization. It's this whole structure that's so biased. It would have been. It's so ridiculous, really.
I don't know what it is that we expected out of them, because I don't think anyone thinks or thought this was going to happen and thought, I wonder what the world's reaction was going to be. But if you had asked me before this happened, I would say, well, of course, someone like UN Women, they stand for all women. If any kind of sexual violence has been used as a weapon in war, of course they're going to speak out. And I know I speak for so many Israeli and Jewish women where the days ticked by and we waited and waited and waited and waited and nothing. We were met with silence. And it's sickening and disappointing. And I no longer feel aligned to, apart from the ones that are here, Jewish Women's Aid, and the ones in Israel, like the ones you work for and have worked with in the past, I no longer feel aligned with any female movement. And I think I speak for most Jewish women here. Do you think there will be any repercussions for these organizations who are still yet to comment or condemn what happened?
Not until there's a very strong structural change. That's one of the things that I'm trying to advocate for in the meetings that I have, asking countries that have are budgeting these UN agencies. And again, it's not only UN Women, it's UNICEF. It's children is supposed to be easy, right?
Yeah.
You're supposed to, what's so hard to talk about children that were decapitated, burned alive, and taken to Gaza from their beds and their pajamas. So I've been advocating for trying to use the budgeting of countries to these UN agencies to set a standard of behavior, of conduct, on what the personnel, who are the personnel that are being employed in these organizations, what their identity, their national identity is, what statements they make. It's the only way. I mean, if a country, a friend of Israel, such as United States or Japan, or that are big funders of these UN organizations, which are totally failed their role of leadership, of a moral code, then they have to, set a different standard, and it only works with the budgeting. As far as I know, it only works. They won't fix themselves.
Mm.
So it's the only way I can think. If there's like a restructural change.
And you flew to Washington recently, was it, where you spoke? Tell me a bit more about where you spoke, who it was to, and how it was received.
So since October 7th, I've been around the world in different countries. Some have been invited by the Jewish community, and some are professional meetings. Lately, I was in Washington. I had meetings with officials in the White House and Senate and Congress. And I did, like I just did here, like more in detail, but talked about the evidential status of what happened on October 7th, and still unfortunately happening to the hostages, and demanded to use any influence they have on helping us on the release of the hostages. And that brought to I was in Japan, I was in the United States and Canada, all over, and there were two discussions in Security Council that are partially a result of our work of the group I'm working with, and the UN report. And so we're advocating internationally, but also with authorities here in Israel. At the beginning, there was I felt like we had to shake the government to understand that also this was part of what happened, and to have protocols of treatment that are trauma informed, and dedicated budgets for sexual assault victims, and the receiving of hostages to have treatment in regard to the possibility that they underwent sexual assault, and more. So also advocating here in Israel.
And what is your message about the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war?
Well, it's nothing new. I mean, it's from ancient history, and the Bible, ever since, ancient history, this has happened. that women's bodies become part of the battlefield. And I just never thought in modern Israel this could happen to us, but it did. And I think this is a lesson that the world needs to learn from, that again, this can occur, and learn from our unfortunate experience on how to treat and how to collect evidence. And no, that's not where I wanted to take my answer. So let's start again. So what's my message? There's nothing new about what happened here. For ancient history in the Bible, women's bodies become war spoils, become part of the battlefield. And that's one of the reasons why this belief is so striking, because, I mean, it's nothing new. It's just new that it happened in Israel. So that is very disappointed. One also interesting thing that I now understand, and this is part of what my work group are trying to do, is we realize that, again, even though it's an ancient kind of behavior, there's no offense, not international and not local or domestic, offense of sexualized terror. I mean, there is terror, there's sexual assault, but sexualized terror is something different. It's terrorizing by sexual assault. So it's beyond the, of course, pain and suffering that is inflicted on the victim. It's what me and you and everyone who understands and witnessed what happened are suffering. We are the victims of sexualized terror, because we understand what this terror organization is capable of. So that's the implications of terror, and it's not of sexualized terror, and it's not criminalized. It doesn't have a name, even though, again, it's not new.
Yeah, which is crazy, and really the single most cowardly thing that you could do, really.
Yes.
And that's, if I could get a message across to them, I would say you are the epitome of a coward for what you've done. And there's certainly not going to be any reward for you in whatever shape or form you think there will be a reward for what you've done. We're all God's creatures, and that is barbaric. And then just my final question, as this episode is literally titled The Forgotten Women of October 7th, what is your message to any victim, ones being held captive and victims alive, and even to the families of victims who didn't survive?
Those are different messages. I guess that it doesn't look, maybe I'm telling this to myself. It doesn't seem that way now. We are very deep in our trauma, and like I said, it's still happening. This is still happening. As long as our hostages are not home, October 7th is still happening. But we, as a nation, will overcome this. We've overcome great horrors and terrors throughout history, all of the same source of anti-Semitism. And we will overcome this, and we will be stronger, and we will be united around this. And I hope the world will be wise enough to learn from our horrific experience on how to avoid and eliminate these kinds of behaviors, even though it doesn't seem this way now. And just most importantly is, I'm praying for the safe return of the hostages and the soldiers to come back safely home.
Well said. Well, I'm hoping that next time we catch up, we have hostages home and safe, because it's you live in constant limbo. And even though I don't know these hostages personally, I've spent a lot of time in Israel. I feel so I feel personally involved and invested in this, and I can't imagine what their family and friends are feeling. But I know I speak for a lot of people when I say I live in complete limbo. I wake up in the middle of the night, I check news sources. I wake up in the morning, I check news sources. It's a constant just prayer, hope, and living in this alternate universe where you are constantly anxious, sickened, and heartbroken. So I do pray for their return. Exactly.
Yeah, I have this necklace that it symbolizes the hole in our hearts since October 7th. It's 10 cents.
That describes it well. Yeah. But if anything, it's united us in so many ways around a complete tragedy. But I guess the message also to people, the more you hate and the more you try and tear us apart, the stronger we are, the closer we are, and the more dedicated we are in a mission to protect each other. And if nothing else, what's come out of this is a real sense of community amongst all Jews across the world. That's for sure. So I hope and pray that there can be some sort of end to this, and we can get our hostages back.
And healing.
And healing, exactly. So thank you so much, Ayelet. I really appreciate it.